Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy the video tonight, if you enjoy the narrations, then please feel free to leave a like and a comment, as every little bit does help. If you really enjoy the stories that I'm reading on this channel and you want to see this channel continue and grow, then feel free to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell icon so you'll receive notifications whenever I upload new content. If you have your own stories, whether they be true or fiction, of the creepy, the paranormal, or the downright sinister, then feel free to send those in to ashes, dust to dust, stories at gmail.com. You'll find the spelling for that in the description box down below. And now, without further ado, let's get into tonight's scary stories. Maple Crest Demon. This is not something that happened to me, but to my husband and his mother when he was 10 years old. We will call him Brett. His mother we will call Kim, and my brother-in-law we will call Mike. My husband moved around a lot when he was growing up. Kim was a single mother who left an alcoholic and abusive husband. Mike was an introvert, and my husband Brett was an outgoing, all-American boy who always had to be doing something. They lived in 5 different homes and apartments in the same city, but the one mentioned most is a 2-story home for rent on Maple Crest Drive. A week after they moved in, small things started to happen. Things would get moved, water in the sinks would start running, and the lights would flicker on and off. They had electricians come in, plumbers, etc., but they never found anything wrong. Things went on this odd way for a while, but then more started happening. They would hear stomping on the stairs, appliances coming on by themselves, and shadows moving down the hall, passing their bedroom doors. Then, about 6 months from the time that they moved in, the shadows started coming into the bedrooms. Brett often woke to something moving in the corner of his room. He said one night he was sleeping with his hand over the bed and something bit him. He would also hear whispers, but they did not come in clear enough for him to understand. Though the scariest things would happen to Kim. One night, she woke up feeling like she was being choked, and there was no one else in the room. She would be cleaning, and something would pull her hair hard. But what she says is the scariest night was the night she was dragged down the hallway and down the stairs. Everyone thought that she was crazy. They did not see the scratches, or the bruises, or the mental strain Kim was going through. She went to the library and got this book on the paranormal. The book instructed to put flour or baby powder on the floor. The first night, nothing happened, but the second night, there were prints in the flour. They looked like what a gorilla's fist Looked like if you made it longer and put talons on the end. That next morning, they packed their bags and moved into an abused women's shelter. They never figured out what it was, just that it terrorized Kim and Brett, but it left Mike alone. The Shadow Man. I have a few short experiences to tell. This all started when I was about 12. I'm 19 now. My sister, Zoe. Father, stepmother at the time, and her 2 daughters, Jade, who was my age, and Maddie, who was my sister's age, camping. We had only been there for a day, and everything was fine. Then me and my sisters decided we were going to go to the stream by ourselves. My father gave us a walkie-talkie so we could keep in contact while we were gone. Now, the place we were going to was surrounded by bush, and to get there you had to go down a little path through it. We spent a while with our shoes off and splashing in the water when Jade said she could see someone standing in amongst the trees. We all looked and saw a figure. It was black, but you couldn't tell it was the shape of a man. You couldn't see the face. We stared for a few seconds, and then he disappeared. We forgot about it and kept playing in the water. But I felt a little uneasy. A while later, we all looked back, wanting to know if he was still there. And he was. Everything was silent. I could hardly hear the rapids in the little stream. We stopped looking. After about 20 minutes, we headed back to the campsite. My sisters lingered behind, and I was about 20 meters ahead of them, but we couldn't see each other. I heard a twig snap behind me, and I turned to look, assuming they had caught up to me. Nope. I turned to see the tall, dark, black figure literally a foot behind me, so I started running. The whole time I could feel him close behind. I ran as fast as I could until I was out in the open campground. He was gone. My sisters came out not long after, and I told them what happened. I asked, but none of them had seen him behind me. They were too far behind, and the path was so windy, so they were around a corner from me most of the time. Throughout our camping trip, we didn't see him around as much, but occasionally we would see him just standing there. Fast forward a couple of years, and we go back there with my father's new girlfriend and her daughter, Stella. I can't recall this trip as much, but I know for a fact that Stella saw him too. 3 years ago, I started seeing him at my fucking house. Just anywhere and everywhere. One day, I was out in the backyard, and I started to lean down to pet my cat, when in my peripheral vision, I saw him right behind me. I ignored him, as he's never really done anything harmful, really. I look solely at my cat as to block him out. As I do, I feel a hand grab my hair and tug. I immediately spun around. Nothing there. I fucked off inside, as I was a bit spooked. I now live with my boyfriend, and can't say 100% if I've seen it again. I sometimes see shadows move behind me in the reflection of the TV, but when I look behind me, there's nothing, so I just chalk it up to a trick of the light. I did hear something recently. This is the most recent event I've had. My boyfriend's alarm went off for work, waking me up too. He switched it off, but lay in bed a bit longer. I was awake then, facing my boyfriend's back, one eye closed as it was smushed against the pillow. Suddenly, I shit you not, I hear someone whisper my name in my ear. It was so clear, and I could feel cold breath on me. I sat up and said to my boyfriend, "Did you say my name?" He looked confused. He was just sitting there, playing on his phone. No. He said he hadn't, which I believed, because it was a female's voice. This doesn't really relate to my other experiences, but I thought I'd throw it in anyway. Devil at church. This is not a story, but actually happened to me. I was at church one night. I live in a small Kentucky town where there's nothing, no hope, no jobs, nothing but churches. I was at one night, and this preacher put his hand on my head and prayed God would reveal himself to me. I got up 'cause all the jumping and shouting scares me, and feel nothing of God moving, more like the perks kicking in than anything else. I went out to smoke. There was a little creek in behind the church. I walked back behind there. The hair stood up on my neck, and I got the feeling I was being watched. I noticed across the stream was a pair of red eyes. They did not seem evil, just maybe interested. I stared what had to be hours, but felt like minutes. Nothing, no movement, no blinking, nothing. Someone else walked out to partake in a healthy smoke too, and I looked back, and the creature was gone. After talking and smoking, we both went back in the church. I never saw those eyes again. True skinwalker sighting. To start this story off, and to give a little insight about me, I am an 18-year-old female who grew up in Michigan and have lived in the country for as far as I can remember. And for heads up, this is a long story, so bear with me. Now back to the story. On one particularly hot summer weekend, me and a couple of my friends, including my boyfriend, let's call him Tony, and my older brother, let's call him Brad, decided we were gonna go camping for the weekend. since it was such a nice, warm week. Tony's parents had owned a cabin way out in Ludington, surrounded by a huge, wooded area with a personal lake and no neighbors for at least 4 miles. But being stupid teenagers, we didn't really think about that. All we were ready for was to party like any normal teens would. Well, after being there for 2 hours, our fun had started. Tony's friends had brung tons of alcohol and weed to last us for the weekend, so we wouldn't be bored since we had no service and only movies to watch. After it got around midnight and was pitch black, we had a huge bonfire going. It was a total of 6 people, including me and Tony, as we talked and laughed about upcoming events in our lives. We were so distracted that we didn't notice that my brother had literally frozen his eyes to one section of the woods. Mind you, we were all intoxicated and high at the time. Eventually, our talking ceased when Tony realized his friend and my brother had emotionless expressions. "Hey dude, you alright?" he asked Brad. Silence. Brad didn't reply or even make any movements that would indicate he heard him. After that, I started to get scared, as well as the other 2 girls there. It took a lot for my brother to act that way. Eventually, I was the first to catch on that he was excessively staring into a certain spot in the woods. I turned my head and followed his gaze best I could, and when I finally caught on to what he was staring at, my heart dropped. There, right fucking there, was, at first look, a dog. At least, that's what I thought. It was some person's dog that wandered off. But then my brain kicked in, and I realized there wasn't a neighbor for miles. So how could there be a dog? My mind started to race, while Tony still tried to get Brad to speak, or even move. In one motion, this thing stood up tall, and when I say tall, I mean fucking gigantic. It had to be at least 6 feet tall. Everyone had seen it then. How could you not? The other 2 girls and the other boy with us gasped as they finally grasped why my brother was as still as a stick. No one moved for what seemed like hours. Tony was the first to talk. "No tail," he mumbled. No one heard what he said but Brad, and I swear to you, when I say his eyes widened as big as pan saucers, that freaked me out immediately. "What did you say?" one of the girls asked. "It has no fucking tail," he hissed at her. My heartbeat stopped. He was right. There was no tail on this thing. Suddenly, my clouded, alcohol mind cleared up in a fraction of a second. when I finally realized what this thing was. Now I understand why my brother was basically shitting his pants. This thing was a skinwalker. My instincts kicked in right then and there. But before I could nope the fuck out of there, the thing let off a terrible stench like rotting meat, before screaming inhuman-like. The sound was enough to scare the fuck out of everyone there. My brother was the first up out of his chair and started shouting native words to the creature, while I told everyone to get the fuck inside. No one questioned me when they'd seen just how dead serious I was, especially Tony. He's never seen me so scared, so he knew it was a bad situation. We all hightailed it into the cabin, with my brother in tow, still shouting native words at the creature, which seemed to keep it at bay while it gave us enough time to get inside. He slammed and locked the door before turning all the lights off and grabbing a special ash from the kitchen counters and started throwing it at every window and door while chanting. Of course, he had everyone freaked out and basically in tears at that moment. After he was done, no one said a word for a long time. All of us still in shock. He grabbed our dad's pistol and had it posted by him for hours. Everyone was entirely too shaken up to even question what happened. We must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to my brother packing all of our stuff into the 2 cars early in the morning. I understood why. We had native family. We knew what we were dealing with, and we knew it would come back, and maybe not alone. Before we left, I did a blessing on the cabin and spoke a few calming words to the still very freaked out girls. We left as soon as everything was packed up. To this day, we still haven't explained exactly to our friends what happened that night, and they never bothered to ask us either. The creature. To give you a little more insight about me, this story happened when I was 14 years old. I was at my friend Emily's house, since back then I lived there for personal reasons. Anyways, it was about 1 a.m. and her parents were gone for the night at her grandma's house. We were watching horror movies and vegging out on snacks like we usually would every weekend night. After our movie, I got up to pee and let her know I'd be back. She nodded before opening up her laptop to message her boyfriend at the time. As I walked down her barely lit hallway and came across the bathroom, I heard Emily's voice call out to me from her back porch. That was on the right side of the hallway, which immediately struck me as odd because I'd never seen her leave the room or even walk past me. And why would she be outside anyway? Her voice called to me again, so I couldn't help but walk out to the back porch. It took a lot to scare me, so I wasn't bothered by this. Turned out to be the biggest mistake ever. A red flag should have went off right then and there. when her voice became silent as I stepped onto the porch. I called her name softly, but she didn't reply. I called her name once more, but this time louder, and again, silence. I stepped off the porch onto the grass, looking into her wooded backyard. A little pissed now, because at the time, I figured she was trying to prank scare me like she usually did. It was normal for her, but when I yelled her name again, a voice spoke, but it wasn't hers. It was another woman's voice. "Help me, please, for the love of God, help me," I heard a woman scream. Okay, now I was officially freaked out, because there was no one for miles around, besides her one neighbor that lived a little ways into the woods. I found myself not being able to move. Curiosity, maybe? But the bushes started rustling, and what looked like a dog stepped out. My first thought was it was her neighbor's dog. Must have gotten out again, because it has happened before. But when this thing stood up on its hind legs, it was about 7 feet tall. That's when I really froze up. What the hell was this thing? I asked myself. I've never met any human that tall in my entire life. When it started to stalk towards me, I eyed it carefully. It was walking kind of human-like, but wobbling like a baby taking its first steps. I found myself not being able to bolt out of there like I should have. I couldn't move. That is, until I heard the sliding door being opened, and the real Emily's voice speak. "Lana, what are you doing out there? I looked around my whole house for you." As soon as she finished her sentence, I bolted as fast as I could and pulled my friend inside before shutting the door and locking it while closing the blinds. I did this to every room, even the basement, locking windows included. All the while, Emily yelling at me, asking me what the fuck was going on. I took her arm and raced into her room before slamming her door behind us. When she finally realized how terrified I was and how badly I was shaking, only then did she ask me, "Jesus, Lana, what's the matter? You look like you've just seen a ghost. What the hell happened?" she asked. I finally calmed down enough to begin telling her what I encountered. But before I got the chance to fully explain what happened, I heard extreme banging on my friend's window, which stunned us both, and we both shot up at least 10 feet in the air. I whispered, "Fuck," when I realized I forgot to shut her blinds. I didn't have the heart to turn around, but when Emily's face went pale, I didn't have a choice but to look behind me. I really wish I hadn't. There, that thing was, looking into our bedroom window. I couldn't even begin to explain what it looked like. All I can come up with is that its body was twisted like someone that had been in a freakish car accident, and it had fur, lots of it, and the eyes glowed much like a cat. A high-pitched noise escaped that thing's throat, making us not only cover our ears, but we both screamed as hard as our lungs would let us as well. I threw my friend on the floor before zooming into her parents' room to get her dad's rifle. When I came back, the noise stopped, and that creature was gone. Emily was rocking back and forth, holding her knees close to her, shaking and crying hysterically. She'd seen its face as clear as I did, and the antlers that it happened to have. To say we were absolutely terrified would be an understatement. The rest of the night, we had all the lights on in the house, and we stayed huddled together in the living room with that rifle right under my legs. Finally, after what seemed like decades, the sun rose, and her parents walked through the door. Almost instantly, her dad noticed our fear-stricken expressions and his gun under my legs. They sat down and softly asked us what happened. When I explained it, they shared worried glances before announcing that we were moving. We never asked why. We were just happy to get the hell out of there. We moved that exact day to the family's vacation home in a very populated city with little to no trees. When my parents got home and we told them, they had the same reaction and told me I could never go out after dark alone and to stay away from wooded areas. Of course, I never questioned it. To this day, I don't know if it was a skinwalker that some people believe in, or if it was an imposter. What I do know, though, is that it was not human.